we'll go on to the next. Does anybody have anything else? I did also, one thing that always comes up for me, the first time I did this as the first opening to a talk about video art was at Fleisher in the sanctuary. And I really just did it because it was like a cool video that filled the space. But the more I watched it, the more I realized, oh my gosh, this is a video art history video. So one of the things she also talks about, right, is she's talking about her mom. She's talking about, for those of us who were around during the time of voicemail, before digital voicemail, there were, machines, voice machines. So it's also this kind of joke about this new technology that's in our world as well. There's like some humor. It's like, hello, are you there? If people remember from coming home and like trying to play the tape back, and there would always be these kind of, periodically there would be these messages, hello, is that you? That kind of thing. So she's also talking about family and also everyday technology in everyday life and our use of technology. So she fits a lot in this, as Vita mentioned, very minimal video. So let me go back, go on. So video art history, again, so there's the canon, and then we could talk about ways in which, if we wanted to do a study group or something like that, that we could unpack it and discover other histories or frame other histories. So video art history, the video art histories that are written so far follow a pretty standard historical, historical, like chronological and canonical model. So it comes out of a lot of the histories that are written, and we have, like, I'll show you three historical texts that are kind of like big histories that fit a lot in, are written with two things in mind. They're written from the perspective of chronology. They almost all use chronological order, and they start in 1967 with this Sony Portapak. So this book, Video Art, came out this year. So I'll just read a little bit from this. It says, the author says, the story of video art begins as video gear first reached the consumer market in the mid-1960s. So this has been the story since way before this book was written. So at this point, this is like the story, is that video art history starts with the introduction of this piece of technology, the Sony Portapak, in 1967. And one of the themes of video art history is that this makes it accessible. But I would push back a little bit on that because, a lot of the video art historians make it seem like the Sony Portapak came out and people could just like go buy one and have it as an individual studio artist, but they were relatively expensive and people usually bought them together. So I just want to say that to push back a little bit on the idea that like the Sony Portapak came out and like everybody could just go get one. Artists were also going to great lengths. So a couple of artists I'll talk about in a little while, one of them went to Japan to get a Sony Portapak. So it wasn't exactly, even though it's more accessible and you don't need, one of the ideas is that this piece of technology becomes available on the market and you can one could start to make media without having a whole crew and without having the backing of a major film company or even a minor film company or a TV station. So that is true, but I just want to also mention that it wasn't necessarily like so widely accessible. If I was going to just kind of give the rundown of a video art history, most video art histories do feature this person widely. Hold on, I'm trying to see if I can. Okay, so this is Namjoon Pike, and Namjoon Pike is considered the grandfather, quote unquote. He's like the paternal figure of video art history, and he does deserve his due. So he is playing with technology. One thing that's going on here in this picture, as you can see, is that there's a response to television. So a lot of these artists, video art history, when the Sony Portapak comes out, it's the story that gets told is a pretty urban story, mostly takes place in New York and in London, depending on where the writers are from, and somewhat in Japan as well. So that's who I will talk about, but we'll also talk about ways in which we could use this narrative storyline that these writers of video art history have made to kind of think about how we might start to research or talk about different kinds of histories or different approaches to thinking about it. But the story goes that the Sony Portapak hits the markets, and that artists who are working start to play with it. But Namjoon Pike is also playing with, so he comes out of sculpture. Another way that these art historians or cultural historians organize the history of video art is by kind of theme. So that they think, okay, it's video art, and they will sometimes break it down. Some of the texts break it down, like some sculptors are using it, painters are using it, and then filmmakers are using it, and dancers are using it. So they sometimes break it down that way. So Namjoon Pike is definitely using video, is definitely exploring video as part of a larger installation-based and sculptural-based exploration. And he's taking things like, doing things like taking magnets and affecting the signal. So one of the questions, and I don't know if this is on anybody's mind, but one of the questions that people often ask in a video art history class is, what's the difference between video and film? And so and so one of the easiest answers is that film is image-based and video is signal-based. And we'll get into why that's significant. But Namjoon Pike is playing with the signals and the technology and making new kinds of contraptions out of them and making sculptures out of them. So this is him laying in amongst his materials. And this is one of his more famous sculptures. He has many famous sculptures, but Buddha watching TV, 1974. So this is really about that signal loop. So it's a play, right? So it's like the Buddha is watching the video of the Buddha, which is a closed circuit. I mean, how many people, probably all of us are of an age where we maybe made faces we walked by like, where there was like a closed circuit TV, and then there were like all these TV screens, and you could like at a mall or on the street, and you could like play with them and like make faces and be like, ah, look, it's me. So this is that kind of a play about that, about closed circuit TV, and really about this concept of signal. So that's one of the key features, right? So when we watch the video of Oh, Superman, there's a lot in there about signal and repetition and signal. So this is Namjoon Pike. I just wanted to, because this is going to be a relatively short lecture and I probably won't focus on all of these artists, I said I have this slide which says Canonical Goats, greatest of all time. So I definitely want to mention Namjoon Pike is often a person who is characterized as the kind of like originator of video art. There is no one originator of video art like most kinds of art, but he is a significant figure. And then if he's a significant figure and people want to think in these terms of like grandfather, then I would say that Joan Jonas is another candidate for this kind of like originating figure in video art history. So we can watch, if we have time, we can watch a video of her. But I also just wanted to offer this slide because one of the things that you can do if you're interested, my study has been on video art history has been mostly independent study, but at this point there have been enough of these kind of canonical shows. So this is the intro page for a show that somebody sent me. They said they were in the video art history class and they were like, look at this. And I said, yeah, this would be a great list of artists to start with if you were just really interested in like who's who of video art, right? And Vito Acconci is at the top. So we can get into, I won't have time to show all of these, but if you want to share this list and just kind of like be Googling these folks, you can. And I'll also share this list of resources that will be on an upcoming slide. But does anybody see anybody here that they like know, like, love, or are just interested in, have heard of before? That's okay. Some of my favorites are who I won't show tonight. Usually if in a longer format, I might show Dan Graham. I usually like to show a video by Dan Graham called now it's escaping me. That's about it's basically like a kind of homemade documentary about the overlap between punk rock and like early Protestant American religions. Oh, it's called Rock My Religion. And it's really interesting. So it's an experimental documentary film. So we'll get into that. Peter Campus, we'll look at. So yeah, there's a list, and I can share that list if you're interested in. So this is Joan Jonas, and I am afraid we don't have time to look at all the videos. So I can share this slideshow if people are interested in playing all the videos. But this is Joan Jonas, and she's a very important figure. She we'll watch a little bit of one of her videos, but this is a video of her talking about the beginning of when she first got her Sony Portapak, and she went to Japan to get a Sony Portapak. So she did not wait until the market. She heard about this tool and started and wanted to get it, and went. And then other artists, I believe, got together and bought one as a group and would kind of share it around in their studios. So another thing in terms of the relationship of video art in terms of the social history of video art history, another thing that's going on is these are artists in their studios making artwork. And this is the first time, even if you could get a hold of a camera like this, it's really, there's things like Super 8, things that take film that you can play with and get developed. But one of the most significant things is, and I'll go over these resources. One of them, I'm just gonna, since we're at 7 o'clock already, I'm gonna go towards, let's look at Peter Campus. So one of the things you can do is you can start to play in your studio, and what you can do is, and this will be, you'll see a little bit of a similarity between what's going on here and that circle effect in the Oh Superman video. So this is Peter Campus. It's called 3 Transitions. And what you can see is that this is something you can't do with Super 8 film, right? Because you need to get Super 8 film, you would need to get developed. So even though you can have a camera and train it on yourself and take film of yourself and then get it developed and watch it later, one of the things that is possible here in terms of experimentation and play is that you can do that, you can play with that loop, that signal that's simultaneously happening. So you basically like a live camera feed. And to us, this may seem kind of fun and silly, but we have that ability at our fingertips all the time. It's almost inescapable now, right? But at the time, it was not something that was ever present where you could immediately see yourself or watch yourself doing something and play with that. So that's one of the 3 transitions. So one of the things that I maintain is we can look at video art history chronologically, and many people do, and then we could look at it thematically. But I think that one of the things that I like to do is look at themes that are not in terms of like sculpture and installation versus painting versus, not in terms of those themes. I'm more interested in what are themes like effects. So somebody said, so when we talk about the themes of video art, I think it helps us to get away from, we'll stick with the chronological, but I think it could enable us to get away from that chronological and see how people have used video art over time in similar ways. So one of the things that I maintain is that one of the large themes of video art and video art history is play. Another, I think, is communication. And so here we'll watch this, and I call it like affect and effect. And this is Nancy Holt and Richard Serra, Boomerang. So one of the things about this that isn't obvious from the video is that this is being broadcast on public television. So there's another theme, which is access, right? You have these like conceptual artists who are playing with conceptual art, but they really have, Nancy Holt and Richard Serra really had this desire to also see what would happen. And this is not just unique to them. A couple artists did this, where they basically got time on a public access station to do these, what we now think of as kind of conceptual art experiments, but they really had a desire for them to go beyond being conceptual art experiments that would just be kind of talked about by artists. They kind of they wanted to get away from that. They didn't really care about that. They were interested, like, what would happen if, you know, a bunch of people in Texas tuned in and saw this.
Yes, I can hear my echo. And the words are coming back on and top of me. The words are spilling out of my head and then returning into my ear. It puts a distance between the words and their apprehension or their comprehension. The words coming back seem slow. They don't seem to have the same forcefulness as when I speak them. I think it's also slowing me down. I think that it makes my thinking slower. I have a double take on myself. I am once removed from myself. I am thinking and hearing and filling up a vocal void. I find that I have trouble making connections between thoughts. I think that the words forming in my mind are somewhat detached from my normal thinking process. I have the feeling that I am not where I am.
Okay, so there were a lot of these experiments had to do with self-perception and identity in ways that maybe are different than the way we currently conceive of kind of the way people work with identity in art, although they are related and they kind of overlap. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. But there's this question about perception and the ability to kind of play back and perceive at the same time, try to perceive at the same time, which now is kind of very familiar to us, right? Like I'm talking to you over Zoom. We're very used to kind of like hearing our own voices or trying to think through hearing our own voices and seeing our own faces or some representation of that. But at the time there was this question, right? Like what happens if we do this? And so it really is a little bit of a kind of like metaphysical philosophical exercise, but then it's also again like this conceptual play that's being broadcast on public television. So what happens if I broadcast to myself and I broadcast to the public? Let's see, so let's go. So signal and perception, and I think affect and effect. And we will watch Vertical Roll in a second. And then Vito Acanchi's Centers is another one that you may want to watch, but we probably won't spend time on it tonight. And then another large theme that I really wanted to talk about is language deconstruction, critical analysis. And so one of the things that gets one of the things that gets people excited about talking about video art, especially when the video art histories start to be written in like the late 80s and early 90s and through today, is their association with what these writers consider to be feminism. And that's a very difficult term to kind of like unpack, but what we're talking about in terms of what their interest is and why you see so many women artists kind of taking up, or the theory behind why you see so many women artists taking up video, is that there was not, while again it's not exactly totally inexpensive, it's still more accessible, and you don't need, at the time in the late 60s, early 70s, it meant that you could make work without going through venues of access. Like you didn't need to necessarily like get approval, right, to get a hold of the technology or to make work and then distribute it. And so another thing that's going on too with the same group of artists is an interest in deconstructing social and doing social critique. And it's also related to this group of artists' background with television. So this is a generation of artists who, it's the first generation of artists who's grown up with television in their homes. And so, I mean, in the I'm sticking just right now with like artists in the United States. So a lot of these artists had grown up for some time period having a television in their home. And then they're using that this medium to critique some of the kind of like social cultural structures that the television kind of brought into the home. So there's a lot of relationship with making television as critical of like society and culture. So this is a very, very famous piece. Has anybody seen this piece, Semiotics of the Kitchen?
Yeah, my sculpture teacher professor showed this to me like my freshman year of college. That's where she like throws the kitchen materials and gets angry with it, right?
Yes.
Oh, I'm thinking of the right one.
Yes, exactly. So let's go back and we'll watch. Hold on. So then I'm glad people have seen this. So we could, it keeps. But yes, Semiotics of the Kitchen. So this is Martha Rossler, and she is using video to critique, to do a kind of social critique. So this is one of the resources on the resource page. It took us to UbuWeb. So we can watch this for a moment, and it's pretty funny. So as you can see, it's like all of a sudden these artists have the ability to work in whatever space they're in, and to be able to videotape something and then play it back. And one of the other things that this video does is that it engages video as not only as a medium, but also as a form of documentation of performance.
Apron. Bowl. Chopper. Dish. Egg beater. Fork.
Okay, so because the majority of you said you have seen it, I'm going to go back to talk about Oh, let's see, can I watch this? Uh-oh, this video is no longer available. So this is Howardina, it was supposed to be Howardina Pindell's video, Free White and 21, where she is doing a kind of something similar, using the medium of video to play with language and also to play with identity and to talk about her experiences. She plays this like young white woman, and she talks about, she basically is doing a satire and talking in ways that reveal ideas about construction of race and privilege, and how that is embodied in this character that she creates. So maybe if I can get another link to that, if it hasn't been taken, I mean, it probably was taken down for purposes of copyright. So if I can find that. I also wanted to talk about Sonia Andrade. So I didn't go through this in this talk, but I did have it on the slide so I can share those. There are a few exhibitions kind of early in the 1970s, the early mid 1970s. And one of them takes place in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And Sonia Andrade's work is there. And then her work is also featured in Philadelphia at a video art exhibition at the ICA shortly thereafter. So this is the ICA, yay, Philly, early video art history in Philadelphia. So the ICA has one of these early exhibitions that focuses on video art history. And it was cool. You could kind of, I mean, it looked really cool. I wasn't there, but there were video watching rooms where it looked like you could take videos and slide them into a video player and kind of watch these videos, which is really interesting. In terms of exhibition, how do you exhibit video art work at the beginnings of the video art becoming a kind of museum thing? And so she's also doing performance that explores identity. None of these themes, all of these themes are intertwined, right? So we're talking about language, we're talking about being critical with language. Semiotics of the Kitchen is funny because to me, it's kind of like a play. It's like a little bit tongue-in-cheek with that use of semiotics, because semiotics was a very like hot topic at the time in cultural theory, and artists, all the like fancy New York artists were reading about semiotics and talking about semiotic theory. So I think it's not only a joke and a play, kind of deconstructing what the expectations are for a like white middle-class woman at the time, which is something that Martha Rossler's coming out of, the culture she's coming out of. But I think there's also a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek play about the pretensions of artists talking about semiotics, but also embracing that, because what those artists are talking about in terms of semiotics is critiquing language and the way language structures our reality and makes things that are not natural seem natural. So it's both, I think, an embrace and a play. And then another big theme is access. So when I read these art history texts and they talk about access, I think what I always hope and what I always try to do in my mind is push past that initial idea that people had like instantaneous access to this technology, because that's not necessarily true. And it's very specific who had access to it. But access still does remain a theme in all of these different ways. And so I did want to mention before closing the talk up that there are studio artists who are dealing with all sorts of themes that are kind of deconstructing. They're using the medium to deconstruct and to play. And another theme I would say that we could explore is interdisciplinarity. There's this idea that video is a very interdisciplinary medium from the very beginning. And then there's this concept of access, and I think where that actually becomes truer than the idea that the technology was very accessible, because again, it was really expensive. I think where that becomes truer is when people start to actually use it in groups together and start to do things. Start to do things together. It starts to become the center of bigger projects. So people are making work and then they're using video they're also using video as a kind of cultural tool for organizing. The Video Freaks, there was a film that there's a film available about them that you can watch. They're a group of artists who were, I believe, in New York City, making video art together. They get caught up in kind of this kind of like coolness of video art. And then they like escape New York because all the like big media moguls are trying to be like, hey, come work for us, you cool young artists, right? And so they kind of have an interaction with a major media corporation, and they leave, and then they open up a small TV station basically in upstate rural New York, and they just make television for the town, and then they make television with the people in the town. There's also plenty of really amazing urban TV labs. So the TV Lab 1972, and then Sankofa Film and Video. And all of these are kind of collectives that to various degrees, they were using television and broadcasting to broadcast their own work, but then they also were to different and varying degrees involved with communities and opening up access, using their access as artists to the technology and their knowledge about the technology to share that on. So there's multiple ways in which access is coming into play, right? They're getting their work out there, and then they're also making it possible for other people to access the technology and make work. And often in these collectives, so yeah, we were just talking about Sankofa. And then there's also media making going on. So again, it's like a two-part project. So some of the founders of these like community access art studios and video studios were also making work that engaged in critical conversation with what was going on in their communities. And that's true. This is, let me see if we can click on that. Yeah, I just thought this was really very, very relevant. So this is Healthcare, Your Money or Your Life, and Downtown Community TV. And this is an expose. So these artists were using, these two filmmakers, Keiko Tsono and John Alpert, were using, basically starting to make experimental documentaries. And I just don't think that, I'm not sure this would be possible to revisit this because of HIPAA, but they go into... Just first see somebody like that and so awake and talking to him for 1 minute and the next minute just like this, but sometimes it just happens that way and there's not much you can do about it. Some of it, a lot of it was related to cutbacks, different types of equipment, new types of equipment. You notice at one point we're looking for a line to go into a subclavian, and it took a long time to find a catheter and it should have been available right away. And it hurts us. People die. Unfortunately, we've made human life a commodity. We tend to always, sell it in some way or fashion, and now we're selling healthcare, and we're in fact selling, people's whole existence based on numbers. Okay, so in some ways we could definitely, so this was an expose where they were using the people who founded the Downtown Community Television Center, who, well, they were among the group, but these two directors, but they're using the technology not only to create community access to the technology in order to create media, but they're also creating documentaries. So Healthcare, Your Money or Your Life was a documentary. It was an expose about a local hospital and the way in which that hospital was, obviously a case example for larger things, but they were really focusing on that and doing interviews to find out what was going on in that hospital with divestment from healthcare and access and increasingly less access for the community to healthcare. So yeah, super relevant to us today. And I feel like, I'm sorry if I'm like frantically trying to go through certain things with video art history, but I'm just trying to do like just a little taste. And then let's go back. And then again, and the Black Audio Film Collective. So this is a list of different film collectives. Some of them were, again, like the downtown, some of them were more sort of like open to the communities that they were in, and some were more about making media that spoke to and with communities, if that makes sense. So not all of them are kind of like open. And then I definitely have, so out of the Black Audio Film Collective, there are many members, but one of the iconic pieces that comes out of that is Isaac Julian's Who Killed Colin Roach. And this happened in 1982, or it takes place after, but using the medium of video to make basically documentary films. So even though this kind of artwork looks very different, oh, and paper tiger television as well. So we're at 7:27, but I do want to talk about paper tiger television. So one of the things I wanted to connect was this kind of like, there are all of these connections, right? Between like Peter Campus's work might seem like kind of funny studio play, right? But when we see what Martha Rossler is doing with deconstructing language, you can see how that that comes through. It's a very different kind of video work that people are making when they start to make documentaries. But there's also things like paper tiger television.
This is a slideshow of paper tiger installations.
Oh.
The very first installation was at the Washington Project for the Arts, and that is Alexander Coburn on the screen talking about the Washington Post. The big exhibit we did at the Whitney was...
Okay, you can watch that later. What I wanted to show about paper tiger television was all of these artists would do these. So this is actually Martha Rossler again, but on paper tiger television, artists and intellectuals and media critics would go on paper tiger television, which was a public access style TV network, and they would read. So this is Martha Rossler reading Vogue. And these things are really funny, but they're also really amazing because what they're doing is they're doing cultural criticism and analysis in this kind of performative way, just on public access TV.
What is fashion? It is glamour. It is excitement, romance, drama, wishing, dreaming, winning, success. What is vogue? It is luxury. It is allure, mystery, romance, excitement, love, splendor. It is fashion. It is clothes, exercise, diet, accessories. It is loving and losing, loving and winning. It is career. It is travel. It is knowing how and knowing who and knowing when. It is inspiration, ambience. It is art. It is furniture. It is architecture. It is cosmetics. It's the new you, the you want to be and can be. The one you wish you weren't, you don't have to be anymore. It is the hair, the eyes, the skin, the pose of glamour. What is Vogue? It is a magazine for women, for the woman who wishes and wants and hopes and identifies with her social betters, with the rich, the upper class, with royalty, with comfort, with luxury, with...
Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna stop. Well, I guess I don't need to stop the share, but it is time if people have questions. I hope that
there was one question about the video freaks and where in upstate New York was the town, or which town it was that they moved to.
That's really testing me.
Yeah, I thought so.
Because I don't remember. It was not. I mean, they did some things in Woodstock, but it definitely was not in Woodstock. I don't think it was Woodstock. It was a very small town. It was not like a small town compared to like New York or Philly. It was like truly a small town. But I don't remember. I can look that up and get back to you. But there is a documentary film that came out a couple years ago about them, which is really great and really interesting, especially if you are interested in them.
Rachel also has a small question that's actually a big question. What do you think is the state of video art today? I feel like that's your next lecture, actually.
Yeah, so it's like Vita asked, oh, do you want to do that? I was like, oh yeah, I'll just like keep it simple, just keep it about these first years. But obviously there's nothing simple. It's like super expansive. And I think that it's really hard. So one of the things I also dislike about these histories is that the more the story gets told, like this little bit about the story of video art begins as video gear first reached the consumer market in the mid 1960s. The more often that's said, the harder it is to think about other possible starts for history. So I'm sorry, I'm gonna get like very like historiography and meta or something, but I think that like, so I don't know what the state of video art is today. I think that video art is a different kind of, I think a lot of the same themes are still really important to people who pick up video. And I think they pick up video for these reasons, to kind of, because it is so much about our culture and so much about our identities, and we use it all the time. I think a lot of the things that people were going to from like existential questions, right? Boomeranging, that's like an existential problem she's dealing with, right? Is like, how can I perceive myself and also be myself? How can I perform and perceive myself at the same time? What is a self, right? And it like falls apart. So you better get ready to go, right? Come as you are. And so I think a lot of these questions are still questions that people deal with video art. But I think it's now, I mean, one of the cool things is that now it really is like, it's just ever present, right? It's a little bit more, I think it functions a little bit more in the way that like photography functioned after a certain period in history, where like everybody has access. So it changes. I just think it's really difficult to say, even though I think people are still using the media, some of these things are still really important about the medium and people's use of it. There's just like, it's so expansive now, it's hard to say. But I was gonna say one thing about the history is that I enjoy thinking about this time period and these artists, but I think that one thing that the history does, it tells this story. It says that like there was the introduction of a piece of technology to a group of people in a specific place and time. And I think that's a really interesting story. And I think if we could take that story and say, and take that framework, we could take that to different locations and different times and see how it functions.
Hmm.
But
Yeah,
saying,
that's
like,
really interesting.
yeah, to help us go beyond just saying like, oh, these are the these are the video artists we should talk about, you know?
Yeah, totally. Suzanne, this was incredible. Thank you so much. Another question is if you would be willing to share the slideshow with folks tonight so that we can see the videos on our own.
Yeah.
Having it all.
Oh,
having
sorry.
it all.
Yes, having it all. Yeah, I'm happy to. And I also definitely want to share the, I'll share the slideshow. And if anybody wants just the list of links, because I didn't really get into that, but there is a list of links in the slideshow to like just expansive pages where you can watch lots of videos, and also, you know, links to the like 3 canonical texts. And if people are interested, I can also share whatever I've made of PDFs, like the little snippet PDFs that I have of these texts as well.
Awesome. You're amazing, Suzanne. Thank you so much.
Hope it wasn't too
No,
cram it
I
in.
loved it. Some like real classics, some things that I haven't seen or thought about in a long time. So I had a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
I'm glad. I hope everyone had fun. It's important right now because life is not always fun right now. So fun for a little while. That's good. Thank you
Yes.
for coming and listening.
Thanks, Suzanne. Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. Come again next week. We'll have a pinhole camera demonstration on Tuesday. And I'm trying to remember what we'll have. Oh, a mosaics demonstration on Thursday. So big fun week next week. Do join us. Thanks again. And everyone have a great night. Stay safe. Thank you, Suzanne. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Vida, I have a general Fleisher question about like classes. So I remember like a few years ago, you guys had more like specific art history classes. Like I took a Japanese art history class, and it seems like there were more like specific in-depth classes. Like all I'm seeing lately is just like a general art history class. Do you know if you're going to get these more specific classes back?
Yes, ideally. They're coming back in the spring. We're going to have a art history class on the photography of the Black diaspora, and a art history class on architecture through Philadelphia buildings. Okay. So those 2 are coming up in the spring. The pandemic had kind of like, you know, a number on all of us. So we've been just focusing on the basics, but hoping to expand again.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure. Take care. Have a good night.